Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like Councilwoman Cook to do the invocation and Councilmember Boudreaux to do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
God of all creation, we come before you today to give you honor and praise. You are the source of all that is good. You are the source of all of our blessings. Thank you for every gift that we have been given. We thank you for the opportunity to come and gather together this day. We ask for your hand of blessing on this meeting. We ask that you would guide and direct our meeting so that it is in full wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work and our goals this day. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, council members. As presiding officer and chair, I'd like to announce the following. To address the council on any item on this agenda, please fill out the request form and submit it to the clerk prior to the call of the agenda item, or you will not be given the opportunity to speak. Staff assistance is available if needed. Items for submission to the council should be handed to Council Clerk Ms. Veronica Williams, seated to my left in the middle. When addressing the council, state your name and title for the official record. The 5-minute rule will be in effect. No debating or confrontational statements will be allowed. The front row to my left is reserved for media. Food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium. Please silence all phones and devices. Meeting procedures are by resolution and not by Robert's Rules of Order. All documents with reference to the meetings can be found on the LCG website. Finally, the council has encouraged your involvement in boards and commissions. If you are interested, please call 291-8800. Chair announcements. Item number 6, Resolution 005-2019, relative to an election call of reallocation of funds. Councilmember Conk will have an amendment reducing the $18 million to $10 million. Item number 7, Resolution 006-2019, has been pulled indefinitely. Item number 12, 0002-2019, Councilmember Cook has requested the ordinance be deferred indefinitely. Item number 13, Appeal of Planning Commission action relative to the Conception Tract 1. Legal has requested the appeal to be deferred until February 5th to allow the legal department the necessary time needed to complete its review. Item number 20, introductory item 009-2019. Relative to the Housing Counseling Grant, Community Development has requested that the ordinance be pulled indefinitely prior to introduction, as they are unable to move forward at this time. I'd like to wish a happy birthday to Jeremy Sweeney, Council's Senior Administrative Assistant. He was celebrated on February 4th. Happy birthday. I would now like to present Kevin Nakan, past chair, with the plaque for his service for 2018 chair. Councilman Nakan.
Yes, I just want to say thank you very much. It was an honor and privilege to serve as chair, and thank you all, and look forward to working with you guys this year, and congratulations on your chairman spot, Mr. Bellard, and Vice Chair, Mr. Pat, and let's have a good year. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. No council chair announcements. Council announcements. Councilman Boudreaux.
Thank you. Just note that item 19 on the introductory ordinances, although it will be going forward in global, as I did not pull it for a public discussion, I will have a request to be made when we address that item prior to the vote. And also I have a request for information that would need to go to planning and development. I request an update of all inspections, condemnations, demolitions in District 4, including but not limited to dates of inspections, dates of notices, dates of contracting assignments, dates of condemnation ordinance, and dates of demolition. Madam Clerk, put this in a written form on my behalf to the department, and I would like that request to be honored in 10 working days. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Councilman Call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was honored and I'm privileged to be serving as the chair of the Acadiana Planning Organization Transportation Policy Committee in 2019. The TPC is actually the decision-making arm for the Acadiana Planning Organization, and in that capacity, our group does review and facilitate all state and federal monies used for transportation in Lafayette, Lafayette Parish, and the region. So I'm looking forward to serving. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Cook.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to announce to the public that I am hosting a town hall meeting along with LUS this coming Thursday, January 24th at 6 p.m. at Le Pavillon, and we'll be discussing things related to LUS operations, the future of the electric system, some customer engagement opportunities, some future projects, and of course there will be plenty of opportunity for the public to engage in question and answer session during this town hall meeting. So I would encourage everyone to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilwoman Hebert.
Thank you, Chairman. Riding the Neckcoats coattails, I'm just going to mention the dates for District 8 Town Hall meeting for LUS is going to be held February 20th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the South Regional Library. That is on February 20th, 5:30 to 7:30 at the South Regional Library. It's again a town hall for LUS for public comment, find out information about how to reduce your bill, etc. So please attend. And then next up, I'm going to bring up a representative, Caitlin Stewart from the Red Cross. She had a quick thing. Caitlin, I know you had a PowerPoint that you want to do, but can you not do the PowerPoint? Just give us a brief description. Sure, come on down.
American Red Cross. I work in volunteer services, and the gentleman to my left is Dutch Berthoff. He's the disaster program manager for Red Cross in Acadiana. We wanted to come here today and introduce ourselves to the council and the people of Acadiana. The most prominent disaster that we respond to is home fires. In 2014, Red Cross recognized this as a serious concern and initiated Sound the Alarm campaign. We're going to be doing multiple events in Lafayette and the surrounding areas. Dutch is going to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you very much for letting us speak with the council. Last year in 2018, Red Cross across the United States in the Sound the Alarm campaign distributed 100,000 smoke alarms with 28,000 volunteers. In 2019, Lafayette has been designated a signature city, and in partnership with the Lafayette Fire Department, Broussard Fire Department, Scott Fire Department, we will have 5 different events across Acadiana where we will be distributing smoke alarms. In the slides that you'll have hard copies of, it shows the locations there, and we'll be looking for participation from residents in Lafayette to help us distribute within these areas that the fire departments have identified as at-risk neighborhoods during the springtime from 20 April to 12 May is the dates for the distribution. The second thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is home fires, something that not a whole lot of folks know that the Red Cross is involved in with disaster action teams, that we've responded to just under 200 home fires in Acadiana in 2018, helping just under 700 people, 54 families within Lafayette Parish itself, 188 people. And volunteers respond, and they're able to help people who have lost their homes and help them with getting a place to stay that night, be able to replace clothing, those kind of things. Volunteers is what puts life into the Red Cross and how we're able to help our neighbors. Looking for more volunteers to help out with those in need in our neighborhoods. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate all the work that you do. Council members, as they mentioned, you have a little packet with those dates if you want to make sure to share with your constituents in the areas so they can take advantage of this opportunity. thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilman Boudreaux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I forgot to mention, we just completed the Martin Luther King holiday celebration, the 34th year here in Lafayette. On last meeting, we did a resolution, but I just wanted to publicly thank those department employees who came out on a day off and made it a day on for themselves, namely the Lafayette Recreation and Parks Department and the Park Police, the Lafayette Public Works Department and the work that they did dealing with traffic and barricades. Of course, the Lafayette Police Department, who provided manpower and womanpower throughout the event, and the Lafayette Fire Department, who also provided personnel throughout the event for safety. Again, some people just don't have an appreciation for public employees and the sacrifices that they make. This was a holiday. This was a day that they could have stayed home, but many of them sacrificed and was out working, and I just wanted to commend those departments and those employees. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd now recognize Mayor President Robideau for his executive report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's nothing on the executive report today.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along, we will go to comments from the public. Comments from, 1 second, Councilman Call.
I do have a question for the Mayor President. What is the status on the Buchanan parking garage?
The status is we've had some internal meetings, Public Works, Administration, Planning and Zoning, and we are in the process of crafting an RFP that I have yet to see. But I think we'll have that sometime soon. We'll run that then by the council before we issue it to the public. But the bottom line on the RFP is we will need a certain number of parking spots out of whatever's done for that footprint. Other than that, I really would rather not handcuff whatever developer is ultimately chosen to see what other ideas they may have to activate that space while giving us the parking that we need. And so whether that's a public-private partnership or public-public-private partnership remains to be seen, but the RFP should be crafted here in the next couple of weeks, I would think, and then we'll be able to start getting that out to the developers and the public to see what kind of response we get.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councilman Terrio.
If I may, Mr. Robideau, and totally up to you, did you want to give us an update on the scooter situation or anything tonight?
And you asked me if I wanted to, so that gives me an out.
That's how I'm throwing it, yes.
Yeah, no, we, starting on Friday, I reached out to both the Bird and Lime representatives, had a good phone conversation with them, told them that after discussions with our legal team, after discussions with Department of Transportation, with Secretary Wilson, we felt like there was some language that needed to be modified in state law to allow us to pass an ordinance regulating them and to allow them to operate. We asked that they voluntarily suspend operations until such time that we're able to get the law changed and getting an ordinance worked out. They have voluntarily agreed to that pause or temporary suspension, and we will all work towards getting the state law or state legislation in place that will give our legal team comfort that they're allowed. And so I do appreciate they were very gracious in the conversations. We actually issued a joint press release today with both of the companies acknowledging what they've agreed to, that they're going to start pulling the scooters. Some, I think they'll pull as early as tonight, but certainly by the end of the week, I would expect for the scooters to all be pulled. And then we'll work together for the next several months. The session runs from March through May. And then whatever legislation comes out of that, the governor will have to sign. So there's a time frame there too. But I suspect we will be revisiting this throughout those 3 or 4 months, and then depending on what the state law looks like, depending on where our conversations lead us, we would then have an ordinance before you to set permits, regulations, and all the things that need to be contemplated. So that's where we are today. Agreed upon temporary, voluntary suspension of operations until we get all these issues resolved.
Very good. Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Williams, anybody for public speaking?
Yes, sir, we do have public comment.
This is the time to speak about topics that are not included on the agenda item. You're reminded the 5-minute rule will be in effect. No debating or confrontational statements will be allowed. Ms. Williams, please call for the first speaker.
The first speaker is Kim Goodell, followed by Kirk Ficcioni.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to address the administration and City Council today. Today I'm here to talk about Resolution 001-2019, which was just approved by the LPUA meeting at 4:30 this evening. This is a resolution calling for an expedited, transparent process to prepare and submit for action an integrated resources plan. I want to first thank the City Council for putting this very important resolution forward for the public. I second want to thank Nanette Cook and Liz Abair for hosting and calling for 2 town hall meetings forthcoming to discuss the particulars about that process. When the city first proposed in July of 2018 the Fix the Charter ballot item, I addressed you all then with my concern of that item. While we did not have all the information regarding the Fix the Charter item, to make an informed decision, I knew the information would be forthcoming. My expressed concern then with rollout was with the city. Also in that same single most important ballot item, providing for the dissolution of the LPUA. This concerned me then to not have a local governing board with the singleness of purpose in deciding the direction that our city was going to take to meet our energy needs and to take full advantage of all new innovations associated with meeting energy needs today. As time went on, it was made public what our mayor had already negotiated for the future of our city with regard to meeting our energy needs. A non-binding deal with a venture capitalist firm. Non-binding or not, the foundation was laid. Today, we're being asked to trust the transparency of this process for an IRP. That single document, I dare say, will establish, once approved, the future of Lafayette and neighboring communities and likely parishes contiguous with Lafayette. I have some very serious questions. I'm hoping that many of them will be addressed in Nanette and Liz Abair's meetings and town halls that they have. But one that I want to bring to the public's attention today is with the resolution itself, one of the closing whereas statements, the Utilities Department will present the results of the IRP to the governing body at the conclusion of the study process. Once I finish talking, I think Bruce might address it as he did, that question as he did in the LPUA. In closing, we trust that administration will indeed deliver a process completely open, completely transparent for not only the public input, but input from an independent, disinterested third-party energy engineering specialist firm. It is our future. It is your process and our right to be a part of it. The Fix the Charter campaign was all about democracy. I say this item is just as important to our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilman Cole.
The resolution to which Ms. Goodell was referring was one before the LPUA, which was the proper authority to address the IRP process. And in responding to your question about who will be the eventual recipient of the plan, that will be the LPUA. And the LPUA, according to the existing charter, remains the governing authority for the Lafayette utility system. And that's why it's not a concurrent resolution on the council agenda. It was only addressed by the LPUA. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, next speaker, please.
Mr. Chair, Kurt Pachoni, who's the first of 8 remaining speakers, and he will be followed by Jacqueline Phelps.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, President. Good morning, council, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to speak tonight about the scooters. Although this might surprise some of my conservative friends, one of my strong-held beliefs is in the free enterprise system. Yeah, I think it is the most productive, best economic system in the world. That's not to say it's not subject to abuse and doesn't occasionally need to be reined in by the government of the people, but I think it would be fair to say that most people in this community share that belief, that the free enterprise system is best and best left alone. I also tend to believe that the best government is less government. That's again not to say that all government is bad. I disagree with the people who love to rail against government, because I believe we are the government. That's what we're doing here tonight. And so when you rail against the government, you're really just railing against yourself. But as a general principle, if we can get by with less government, I think that's a good thing, and we should do that. And again, I think it's fair to say that probably most of the people in this community would agree with that sentiment. So it really surprised me. It surprised me very much when I observed on social media the alarm with which people reacted to the introduction of scooters in this community. Here you have a business, an enterprising business, that has selected our community as the first city in the state of Louisiana to get these scooters because they felt like this community was the place where they had the greatest chance of success. And I guess because they're high profile, the first thing, everybody's knee-jerk reaction is we need some government regulation. My thought is government regulation should not be plan A. It probably shouldn't even be plan B. Maybe plan C if all else fails. But putting aside the fact of just having no regulation at all, and since we seem to be heading towards some regulation of this new business, let me suggest this. There are already state laws on the books regulating bicycles. You see the road signs all the time, share the road, with the big symbol of the bicycle. And Lafayette has a city ordinance also dealing with bicycles. It changes the rules a little bit and allows bicycles to use sidewalks under certain circumstances. I'm not going to quote the language here, but a good example of where our local city ordinance applies would be on Ambassador Caffrey, right? You don't want people riding their bicycle in the right lane of Ambassador Caffrey, so if you read our city ordinance, it allows a bicycle to use the sidewalks on Ambassador Caffrey. You've got to use a bike lane where there's a bike lane available, but they can use sidewalks under certain circumstances. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar and you've all seen the avid cyclists around town, the guys and ladies who have the helmets and the very colorful jerseys, and they're riding the expensive bikes. Those folks, the avid cyclists, when you see them riding, they're usually riding between 15 and 20 miles per hour. Well, I've ridden these scooters. The Lime scooters actually have a speedometer on them, and they max out at about 16, 17 miles an hour, about the same as a cyclist. They have 2 wheels. They occupy about the same footprint. It's basically a person on a bicycle, but with a motor, a small electric motor. The rules that we have now governing bicycles would be sufficient. And because I also believe that simplicity in regulation is also the best regulation, my recommendation would be that this city council once the state laws are in place that would allow you to do this, simply adopt an ordinance saying that all regulations of the state and local ordinances that apply to bicycles also apply to scooters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Ms. Williams.
Jacqueline Phelps, and she's followed by Yolanda Broussard.
Good evening, council folk. Good evening, Mayor President. My name is Jackie Phelps. I come here tonight as a member of an organization called Move the Mindset. I am also a faith leader in the community. I am the vice president and past president of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lafayette. Our congregation is celebrating I believe it's our 63rd year. We're also celebrating the 300th anniversary of the Edict of Torda that promulgated religious tolerance in what is now Czechoslovakia and Lithuania and made our church denomination approximately the 5th largest in the United States possible. I'm here to speak about the statue purportedly of Alexander Mouton. As I'm sure you all know, this statue was erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy in 1922 and donated to the city, and it currently does sit on city property. I want to ask y'all a series of questions, or give you a series of things to think about. Many people who are opposed to moving the statue, and there are misconceptions that our organization wishes to destroy the statue. That is false. We would simply like it moved to possibly a Confederate cemetery, a museum, possibly the Mouton House, where it can be seen in context. That statue is a symbol of white supremacy and racism. It was erected, as I said, in 1922, which was an era that saw a renaissance of the Klan. Many such statues were erected throughout the South. Virginia, where I was born and raised, in Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, there is Monument Avenue, which for blocks has large statues of Confederate generals and one of Arthur Ashe. I'm sure you know who Arthur Ashe is. You also know that many, many cities, including cities in Louisiana, has seen fit to remove their I'm not even going to call them Confederate monuments. They're monuments to Jim Crow, to the concept of Jim Crow. They're also monuments to the Lost Cause movement, which, with large involvement of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, placed in textbooks in Southern schools in the South a false history of the Confederacy and the Civil War, that it was about states' rights. We have extensive documentation from the time that gives the true reason for the Civil War. It was to preserve chattel slavery. Knowing all this, I wonder why the city of Lafayette, a city that purports to be a modern city, a forward-thinking city, lets itself be defined by a symbol of racism, a symbol of white supremacy, of outmoded ideas, why it cherishes a symbol that does not believe in the United States of America, does not believe in democracy, and symbolizes the worst aspects of our country. I would like y'all to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Williams, next speaker, please.
Yolanda Broussard, followed by Frederick Prejean.
Good afternoon. My name is Yolanda Broussard. I'm Yolanda Broussard, and I'm here to talk about the moving of the statue as well, because I feel like it's a white, it's white concept, and it's a downgrade, like racism. When I was coming up as a young kid,
Ms. Broussard, can you speak into the mic a little bit more so we can hear you?
when I was coming up younger as a young kid, Lafayette was such a joyous place, really exciting. And now being that I'm a resident of Lafayette, it's like, it's not the same. Everything is going down, and the racism, and I'm against I think the statue really needs to be moved. I'm really not happy with it. And I would hope that y'all have considering that where I'm coming from. Because I mean, I feel like, how would y'all feel if y'all was in my shoes? If that makes sense. And it's causing a lot of destructions in the schools too, with the racism, because my kids are coming home complaining about black, white, this, that, and I'm totally against that, all because of the statue. I mean, what was the purpose? I'm looking in my phone book for something, and this pops up. Really? Thank y'all.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Williams, next speaker, please.
Frederick Prejean, followed by Agnes Corville.
Good evening, Parish Council, Mayor. No, just hold it up. I'd like you to look at this book. It's with great disappointment that I stand before you with shame for our city, especially during the period preceding and during the Martin Luther King holiday, when people of goodwill celebrated the life of a great man. A booklet, The Real Yellow Pages, recently distributed in our area, highlighted on its cover page a picture of Alfred Mouton Jim Crow statue. It was distributed during a week of the anticipation of the national recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King's annual celebration. Needless to say, there is a stark contrast between the values of these two men, one man dying in a war to help end the unity of the United States of America and maintain the enslavement of black people, while the other man sacrificing his life to attain freedom and justice for black people. What a contrast of difference in the morality of the two men. Yet this city of Lafayette continues to maintain the statue in a place of honor of one of these two men. It is truly sacrilegious that this picture of Jim Crow statue representing oppression and subjugation of black people was distributed seemingly to mock the commemoration of a great American, Dr. Martin Luther King. To have this picture distributed on the eve of the ML King holiday exemplifies the racial hatred that exists in this city, just as the racial slur which appeared on a banner at our university recently. Dog whistle is defined as a type of strategy of communication that sends a message that the general population will take a certain meaning from, but a certain group that is in the know will take away the secret intended message. Dog whistle is what the yellow book pictures represent. It is obvious this dog whistle is intended to create solidarity among local white supremacists. Why else would this real yellow book contain a Jim Crow statue on the cover of a booklet containing a listing of federal, state, and parish government agencies as well as business listings? Why a statue? A Confederate statue, a Jim Crow statue. Every business throughout this nation that may have considered establishing an office or business in our city but sees this picture will visualize and interpret this dog whistle as a city comprised of people who foster racial disharmony, the absence of inclusiveness, and the avoidance of diversity. Such an absence of moral values of humanity will certainly nurture avoiding establishing a presence in this environment. Preserving history and heritage is important, but heritage is not sacred just because it is our heritage. Heritage is sacred when it is moral. None of our ancestors were perfect. We can fuss and disagree, but we can do so with respect and dignity. May our God forgive those who would try to goad us into showing anger and violence by their delivering this Jim Crow picture throughout our city. Instead, we choose to show calm disgust and lust and let fate address their ignorance. Our Move the Mindset organization will respond to this real Yellow Pages charade, but we will do so like men and women of good character and intelligence. The promoters of this will not benefit, rather, the growth of our city may suffer as a result of their ignorance. In closing, may the dignity and honor of Dr. Martin Luther King forever grace this land through his efforts to attain freedom and justice for all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker is Agnes Corville, followed by Jeff Case.
Good evening. I want to thank the Council for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Agnes Corville. I live in Opelousas. I am a social studies teacher in a French immersion program. Malik is standing outside his social studies class in the hallway, obviously upset. Bonjour, Malik. Are you not coming in? Sorry, Miss Corville. I cannot enter your class. Why not, Malik? There is a display in your class, and I know what that display means. I feel uncomfortable and oppressed. I cannot come in. Are you talking about the Albert Mouton statue, Malik? Yes. The Moutons were slave owners who allegedly persecuted blacks. The statue is a symbol of slavery, the Jim Crow era of black oppression. I feel oppressed. I cannot come in your class. This case scenario is an example of what a student of color in my social studies class can experience in the presence of a symbol of racial prejudice. As a nation honored yesterday the life and legacy of Dr. King, we should all ask ourselves, what are we doing to help achieve King's vision of a beloved community? What are we doing to the kids? Fred Prejean, chairman of Move the Mindset, was standing in a crowd at the Lincoln Memorial when Dr. King delivered the now famous speech. He said, if Dr. King were alive, he would be on the front lines of calling for the removal of all Jim Crow monuments. There are monuments saluting white supremacy, and that is something Dr. King fought against all of his life. While Move the Mindset and other Lafayette community members, including myself, are hoping their message will be heard by Lafayette city leaders to take down the statue that honors a figure who fought to enslave people of color, the Yellow Pages phone book that is published by the main telephone company, AT&T, in Lafayette area, decided to use the Albert Mouton statue as a cover art on their phone books. I have one word: disgrace. The statue has no other purpose than to intimidate blacks and maintain white supremacy. With AT&T, the Lafayette Yellow Pages phone book serves the same purpose. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A complex message can be conveyed with a single picture. There is color in words. When I say I love you, I see pink. 3 words in pink. What is the color of these words with a Confederate statue as a cover art? Where is equality when you are a black business owner with a Yellow Pages phone book in your hand representing a symbol of racial prejudice on the front cover? The mission of the Lafayette International Center has been to foster an increase in international commerce and tourism in the Lafayette area. I personally have many people coming all over the world and from Francophone country. What do the tourists think when they face the statue? What is their emotional experience? Do they want to stay outside and not come in anywhere in Lafayette like my student Malik will have done? This does not represent the community that I wish to live in. As Fred Prejean just said, heritage is sacred when it is moral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Call?
I was not the recipient of this telephone book. Is it produced by AT&T? Definitely. It's on the cover as an AT&T product. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Ms. Williams, next speaker, please.
Jeff Case, followed by Andy A. Bear.
I'm Jeff Case. I live in the 9th District. I'm the president of my church, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lafayette, one of many partner organizations of Move the Mindset. On behalf of my church and myself, I speak to support Move the Mindset, and I urge this council and the city and parish of Lafayette to stand up on the right side of history and move the Alfred Mouton statue from its current location on public land to a place of historical context. This statue in its current location without historical context causes pain to your neighbors. You may or may not understand that or be able to relate to it, but it's true. Imagine if your son or your daughter saw a statue on public land without historical context to someone who had hurt their ancestors and relatives. This would cause pain to your son or daughter. It causes pain to your neighbors. Many religions and spiritual practices say pretty much the same thing about your neighbors. Rabbi Hillel, a great Jewish sage, said, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Confucius taught, what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. The Buddha advised, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. A Hindu Purana or sacred text proclaims, that which is unfavorable to us, do not do that to others. Muhammad is said to have taught, as you would have people do to you, do to them, and what you dislike to be done to you, don't do to them. And Christ said in Mark 12:31, love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater. This statue in its current location without historical context causes pain to your neighbors. If you do not do anything about it, you continue to cause that pain. Now I'll talk about the South, but first I do want to mention that slavery occurred in the North as well for many years, and some northern states continued it as late as 10 years before the secession crisis. But by the time the Civil War began, it was only in the South. I will also be talking about myself here, and I'll repeat a few of the things that I told you when I spoke here on this topic about 4 months ago. My family has roots here in Louisiana. Going back before the Civil War, several of my ancestors fought on the side of the Confederacy. I have a letter from one of them, George M. Dixon of Downsville, Louisiana, to his sister during the time of the war. From this letter, I think he was basically a good man. I honor his memory. That is my history. I believe the same about many others who were on the side of the South in the Civil War, that they were basically good people. But relating to slavery, they all were on the wrong side of this war and of history, including my ancestors. Every person ever alive has done good things and bad things, been in the right and been in the wrong. Most of them still deserve honor, but we must be honest about the good and bad that was done. That is history. Alexander H. Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederate States of America during the Civil War, said, quote, our new government is founded upon, its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition, end quote. In 2013, Gaines N. Foster, professor of history at LSU, said, these monuments and the lost cause were as much about the present as the past. They offered a vision of the proper social order, one in which the lower classes deferred to leaders and African Americans remained subservient to whites. In the same decades which most of the monuments went up, the white South created a repressive racial order based on segregation, disenfranchisement, lynching, and other forms of white racial violence, end quote. I'm going to be honest now about my history relating to slavery. I'm going to say the word we, since it was my ancestors. We were wrong. We, the Confederacy, were in the wrong. We, the Confederacy, were on the wrong side of history. We need to try to do things to make things right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Ms. Williams.
Andy Abear, followed by the final speaker, Dr. Michael Walden.
Good evening. Happy New Year. Last time I spoke to y'all, I asked if there was a duplicate ordinance to call for an election to abolish our government and to create 2 new councils. I asked if there was a duplicate LPUA ordinance, Resolution R055-2018, that y'all passed, that the LPUA passed. There is none. There's no ordinance or resolution calling for any abolishment of the governing authority of the Lafayette Utility System, Public Utility Authority. I want this on record. make sure it's printed in the records. Because I know you'll just put Andy Hebert spoke. So we want this documented, that the public will see, because we know maybe nothing will happen, maybe something will happen. But if nothing happens, at least the public will know somebody said something. Because at the last meeting, it was understood that for any legal action to take place, both councils had to approve. So for you to change the governing authority of the Lafayette Public Utilities System, the LPUA would have had to have passed a duplicate resolution, R055-218, and a duplicate ordinance, R121-2018. And I received a letter today from the legal department stating there is no records, none whatsoever, of any action by the Lafayette Public Utility Authority to have an election of the duly qualified electors of the city of Lafayette to abolish the LPUA. And the charter clearly states that to dispose of any of the Lafayette Public Utility Authority to anyone in any manner requires a vote of the duly qualified electors of the city of Lafayette called for that purpose. That never took place. Serious question of voting rights. Serious question of due process. Serious question of representation. I think someone may not, is the question of who's that somebody, may question the authority of any takeover of the Lafayette Public Utility System in the future. I think that there should be a question asked to the Attorney General. Is it legal for the LPUA not to have duplicate resolutions or ordinances calling to abolish itself? Have you ever heard of a governing authority not asking to abolish, calling an election to change its governing authority? That is unbelievable. We talk about the democracy, the process. That is the process. The LPUA has to call an election to abolish itself, and it did not do that. Please place all of that in the records. Thank y'all. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, last speaker.
Last speaker is Dr. Michael Walden, and as he comes up, they did have one citizen who did not wish to speak who signed in to support the scooters.
Good evening. My name is Michael Walden. I'm a resident of Lafayette in District 3. I had three quick things that I wanted to mention this evening. First, I wanted to say that when I used to have to travel a lot for my work, I would go into new cities. If I had pulled open the drawer of my hotel room and seen a picture of a Confederate statue on the front of the Yellow Pages, even 10 years ago, I would have thought this is a city I don't want to do business with. This is a city that's mired in the past and is mired in racism. I would not have, by my own volition, done business with that city. I think that's the impression we're going to give to a lot of people by keeping that statue up and by now having the statue featured on the front of the Yellow Pages for everybody that visits to see. Second, I wanted to mention we lost a wonderful community leader this last weekend, Thetis Cusimano. who passed away. I first worked with Thetis about 2 years ago. We were working, trying to get more public interaction and public input into the decisions at LUS. And, you know, I probably would have called my councilman and complained and griped. Thetis had a different approach. She had us all sit down and look up what do they do in other cities with municipal electric companies. Let's document that, and let's be able to take that to LUS and to the council and show them how other cities operate. And we discovered many other cities have public groups. They have public meetings once a year where they present their plans. And certainly our group had been told we had to pay $0.25 a page to get a paper copy of the old IRP. Now things are changing. I'm told that the IRP and the old engineering reports now available online, and we're starting to have some public meetings and public input, and I hope that all works out well, and I think Thetis would have been happy about that. The final thing that I want to mention is that I got a notice of a public meeting, and I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about it, and especially the council and all the interested citizens. There's a public meeting presenting the Lafayette Regional Expressway Tier 1 environmental impact statement a week from today on Tuesday. It's going to be Tuesday, February 20. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a month from now. Tuesday, February 28th, 2019. The South Regional Library, and they say that they've posted the environmental impact statement online. It's at their Lafayette Regional Expressway website, which is spelled funny. They leave off the E from expressway. So it's LRXPRESSWAY.com. I hope people will be informed about that. This is I think a very positive thing for Lafayette. The Lafayette leaders way back in the early 2000s went to the legislature and got the approval to set up the commission to study this. It's moved much more slowly than I think anyone ever thought it would happen. But now the Tier 1 environmental impact statement is coming out, and we all need to, I think, go there and look at it, and if you agree with me, support it, and let your council people in all the 3 parishes that impacts know that we hope they will support it, and our legislature to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move to resolutions part of this meeting. Jeremy, please read.
Resolution 5, 2019. Resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council ordering and calling a special election to be held in the Parish of Lafayette, State of Louisiana, to authorize the rededication of special taxes therein, making application to the State Bond Commission in connection therewith, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
I need a motion and a second. Motion from Kevin Nakier, Councilman. Second from Councilman Terrio. Councilman Call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was my intent to ask the council to amend this resolution as submitted by the administration. Excuse me. However, I will defer that for the moment and ask that the Mayor President share with all of us what he discussed with certain council members prior to this meeting. Mr. Mayor President.
Your mic's hot, sir.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some of these issues with the council and the public, both those in attendance and those that are tuning in. Let me begin by saying that from the summer of 2014 until the time that I took office, Lafayette Parish lost over 20,000 jobs, and the impact of that cannot be exaggerated. When we have a technology company that's going to expand by 400 jobs. It's big news because that's 20 million of payroll. Well, you can imagine the impact 20,000 jobs has on this. And so what we did as an administration, as a council, is we made some extremely difficult cuts, across the board cuts. We cut the DA and the judges, and I think we all remember how painful that was, the volunteer firefighters. A lot of really difficult decisions were made because of the budget. And then on the heels of that bad news, we had the flood in August of 2016. So then I began to dig in the books to try to find money to help with the drainage issue, knowing that the budget was as thin as it had been in decades. Much of my analysis was spent on the various fund balances, what revenue made it up, what expenses made it up, and whether we were collecting more than we needed, or in a lot of cases whether we were collecting less than what we needed. In the early summer of 2017, June to be exact, I reached out to Ms. Elverson with the library, asked her to schedule meetings with the board members, and over the next couple of days, those that she was able to get scheduled came to my office to discuss the possibility of rededicating some of the library's fund balance to address the drainage issue. I explained to them that that I was doing the same thing as it related to the combined public health millage, and that the vote would actually take place in November of 2017, because you have to introduce and go through the process, so it's a fairly long process. That's why the conversation started in summer of 2017. In conjunction with those conversations of the rededication, I offered to put the upcoming millage renewal on the ballot, similar to what we did for the public health millage, because I felt like the voters would respond to the library agreeing to rededicate some of those funds in order to help with the drainage situation, and out of respect for a lot of our residents that had been flooded and were suffering from the effects of that flood. And I thought that that gesture would also allow for the millage to give it the best chance to be renewed, because I think the voters would have appreciated that gesture. As was their prerogative, the library came back to me and said that they'd rather keep their fund balance, and that they were going to go and try to get the millage renewed on their own, and that library millages never fail. So our positions didn't align, but as I say all the time, we can't let our differences, we shouldn't take them personally, we can't let that get in the way of doing the work of what the public expects out of us. And so the library's renewal was put on the April of 2018 ballot. In April, prior to the early voting, is when I had my parish address, which is about as public a venue as I can have. All the media outlets there, everyone's there, and I made a statement that I won't read to you, but it was about the importance of renewing the library millage. It touched on the digital divide. It touched on the utilization, that my original gut instinct was that the library utilization was down when in fact it was up. And I challenged the voters to go to the library and see how many children were there doing their homework, because the only access they had to connectivity was their phones. And the libraries, for those families that found themselves in that situation, served that purpose to satisfy the digital divide. And I say all of that just to remind everyone that the discussion started about the rededication a long time ago, back in the summer of 2017, when I had those meetings. It's not a new discussion. It's not because me or any of the councilmen or anyone for that matter wants to punish the library. It's just simply a discussion about the best use for tax dollars and how they should be allocated. Saying that, some of the conversations I had earlier with some of the councilmen was just a brief history of how we got to the $40+ million in fund balance. On November 5th, 2002, there were two ballot initiatives that were put on the ballot. One was authorization of a $40 million bond issue for the construction of libraries. One was renovations to the main library downtown, and then it was the Karen Crow Library, the library out off of La Nouvelle near Fallbacher Field, and the South Side Library off of Johnson Street. And that millage, that bond authorization for the construction was followed by a ballot initiative establishing a new millage, unlike the two millages that existed, which stated for the operations, maintenance, and supplies of the libraries. This millage added the word construction. Construction, maintenance, and operations of the library. And so it stands to reason that the voters that are voting for the bond authorization of $40 million for the construction of libraries and the following ballot initiative that says there's a millage for the construction, maintenance, and operates of the library would think that the new millage was for construction and would be used to pay off the $40 million bond issue. But that wasn't the case. The bonds that were issued were what's known as general obligation bonds of the parish, and those bonds were then and are today paid from a completely separate millage that's labeled road, highways, bridges, bonds. A fourth millage that benefits the library. And that meant that the newly passed construction millage could accumulate unencumbered for years. And it did, to the tune of $40 million, because the bonds were issued to construct, to renovate downtown, to construct the 3 libraries that we talked about, and they were paid for out of this other millage. Yeah, I should have brought I had my property tax bill because I wanted to look to see exactly. It's called roads, highways, bridges, parentheses, bond. So it is a general obligation millage that doesn't come up for renewal. It exists as long as there's a balance on those bonds that were issued.
Councilman Boudreaux, please hit your button.
I'm sorry, yeah, it does not mention libraries in the description. So the library issued 7.3 million bonds in 03, 14.6 in 05 to renovate and do the 3 new libraries. The 21.9 million has subsequently been paid down to 13.5 million today, and will continue to be paid out of this fourth millage until it's paid off. Late 28 is late 20s, 2028, I think, is the expected time. So now let's fast forward to 2012. Remember, this was the 2002 millage, which means, as they should be, millages are up for renewal every 10 years. For us to go back before the voters and say, here's what we did with your money, please renew it, or we don't need it anymore. So
Mr. President, before you go to 2012, I want to request Lori, I know she jumped on her phone, is anything else being paid out of that fourth identified millage besides libraries, besides the payoff of these construction of libraries?
Hang on, Ms. Toops, let me put you hot. Your mic
Yes, yes, sir. It is for the parish-wide road and bridge and drainage projects that were approved when those bond issues were approved.
So those road, bridges, and parish-wide projects was named in that bond, and in addition to that, the library construction, what he's talking about now, is also being paid for out of that.
Right, and that goes back to 2002, 3?
So that was named, that was also named in that millage. It was described for such.
Yes.
It wasn't, libraries wasn't in the title, but it was listed in the projects, evidently.
I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Robideau because he's got all of the proposition language, but there was a separate proposition that the voters approved for the 40 million for the library, but it's all lumped into one millage that I referred to it as the general obligation bonds, but it goes for the projects that he's referred to.
Okay. All right.
And I'm checking right now with somebody who's got their property tax bill to see how it's listed.
Okay, thank you.
And so let me just provide just a little bit of clarification. Anytime any one of the entities or the council goes to the voters to ask for bond authorization that are general obligation bonds, whether it's for roads, whether it's for drainage, whether it's for the library, all of those can be separate authorizations that you go to the voters for. The libraries was a separate authorization from the one for roads and drainage, but they're all general obligation bonds, and they're all paid for out of this general obligation bond millage that happens to be called roads, highways, bridges bond. So now we go to 2012 when that millage, that construction millage, is up for renewal. And so voters during that time correctly began to question how did the fund balance go from 3-point-something million to 31-point-something million if we've built all these libraries, but we've been paying this construction millage that we were under the impression was going to then pay off those bonds. I think some found out that the construction was being paid from another millage and that the construction millage was just accumulating. The completely honest answer to anyone that would have asked the question would have been to acknowledge that the building program was being funded completely from this road, highways, bridges, parish general obligation millage rather than from the library construction millage. Instead, the company line was more that the building program was taking longer to finish than what was anticipated originally, with no mention of the need for the construction millage wasn't there because there was this other millage to pay those bonds. So perhaps realizing that voters were starting to believe that they were misled 10 years ago, after 2012, the library decided to fund the Scott Library out of the construction millage rather than issuing bonds that they had the authorization to issue. So the Scott Library, the security systems for all the buildings, the new self-service checkout, all of those things, beginning after the 2012 renewal was in place, have all started to be paid out of that construction millage. That is why you'll see about 15 million that comes off of the 40-something million that had been sitting in the fund. It is for the Scott Library and those other items. With all that said, the fund balance with the 15 million that's been identified to come out of the construction millage will end up with about $26 million at the end of this fiscal year. Actually, that's not accurate. The 3 millages are still in place. I know 1 millage didn't get renewed. So there's going to be about $1.5 million to $2 million extra that the revenue generates. So if it's 26, it may actually be 27 to 28 million fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. So my summary is this. Since 2003, the revenue from those 3 library millages grew from 4.8 million to 13.4 million. And that's because property value increases, new developments, new businesses locating here. And so the assessed values went from 831 million to 2.3 billion. So you've seen a natural, growth there of the taxes that we collect, significant growth. And if you look at the last 5 or 6 years, you'll see that the library's operating budget, if you back off the one-time capital expenditures that have been coming out recently and look at the pure operating, 7.8 million, 8.9 million, 9.7 million, 10.2, 12.3, and then most recently we approved a $12.8 million budget. So just in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen about a 70% increase in the operations. And I bring that up just because we're getting beat up over the head about how fiscally conservative they are with this savings account that they built up. I think the facts prove that it wasn't necessarily fiscal conservatism. It was just that it was a a millage that ended up not being used because there was a fourth millage that most people weren't aware of. But in fairness, I do want to say that that growth, that 70% growth was because there was a lot of these libraries that were constructed that came online, and so there was additional personnel needs. And so using that 12.8 million and assuming a growth rate of 2%, after 10 years, that 12.8 million will grow to about 16 million to operate the library. The remaining 2 millages, so I know one failed, so let's just pretend like it's failed forever. The remaining 2 millages will generate about 11 million next year. It's a reassessment year. And then if I look at historical growth over the last several decades, it'll grow gradually to more than 19.4 million, around 19.4 million of revenue to cover the 16 million. So those projections suggest that in 10 years, the library fund will grow by an additional, the fund balance will grow by an additional 8 million. So under the proposal of the resolution as written, where we were going to leave 8 million, it would grow to 16. Whether it was the amended proposal, leaving 16, it would grow to 22 million. So I believe that the most important thing for life, way more important than the fund balance, is the passage of the next millage that's up for renewal, which is in 2022. I think that's the most important thing for the future of the library, and quite frankly, I think Lafayette also. But a realistic strategy needs to be put in place now. I believe, obviously, that the best strategy is to show the taxpayers that the library is operating in a fiscally responsible manner, that it maintains a reasonable fund balance for identified needs, not future growth, because I believe historically we see that the future growth is going to take care of itself.